You are not immune to propaganda. Yes, you. Because nobody is. I'm going to need some of my fellow white folks to sit down and listen to this story time, particularly if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community or disabled or experience some kind of marginalization that is not due to your race. This is the story of how a lifelong Tumblr social justice warrior / political science degree haver almost fell down an alt-right pipeline. I, like many of the other vagina havers on this application, got diagnosed with autism by a doctor at 24. Understandably, finding out that kind of information about yourself when you're
a lifelong soul searcher, feeling out of place type of girly
puts you in a position of being primed for answers. And unfortunately, as we all know, the medical system is not particularly effective at treating people that fall outside of very specific identity groups. So I was shit out of luck there. I came across this trend on autism TikTok that is called pathological demand avoidance. And yes, I use the word trend because that is all that it is scientifically. You can argue with the wall. On the surface, pathological demand avoidance tells a compelling story that people try to spin as a diagnosis when it does not have any statistical evidence behind it. I fell for it because I did not do my due diligence, hook, line, and sinker. I started a PDA autism TikTok account that posted all sorts of my experiences I retroactively fit to this descriptor. The descriptor of which is primarily just saying that autistic people are insanely traumatized and do not get to do the things that their body and nervous system tell them that they need to do to regulate. Pathological demand avoidance is described as activists, as a representation of autistic people who cannot follow through with demanding language or demands in general. So think something like, you need to get up and get out of bed and stop playing video games and eat your dinner now. I started posting these things and self-ascribing and self-identifying with what was effectively a belief system being couched as scientific terminology. If you look into this topic for longer than 3 seconds, which I did not do, you will see a ton
of psychologists and psychiatrists and psychiatric professionals and like autism experts
arguing over the efficacy of this term in the first place because it literally describes something that is a somewhat consistent trait across multiple different neurodivergences. There's arguments around whether or not it's actually even autism. And I watched from the sidelines a month into this pipeline of radicalization as people justifiably started bringing up critiques and asking questions. And the people that I followed, and I literally mean did not register to me in any capacity at all that this was what was going on, full-blown descend into Nazi and alt-right talking points. Okay, we're getting back into Asperger's was not as bad as people say that he is. Oh my fucking God. And because I try very, very hard to not be intellectually dishonest when I recognize that I am doing so, I sent a video out being like, hey, what are the critiques of this idea that everyone is so hot off the presses about? We're like really pissed off and all angry at each other over this. And some very, very kind people who had to take time out of their own day to teach me how I had hurt them did so. And it opened my eyes. I then got a front row seat to watching people who had extended so much more empathy than I deserved as a person get raked over the coals in every conceivable way by white women claiming that they were being mean. These people were not being mean. They were being blunt and direct, which is an autism trait. And when fellow autistic white women took issue with that, they immediately weaponized it in a way that was racial without understanding how ableist they were being on top of it. There is no need for pathological demand avoidance. And all that it does is separate higher support needs individuals out from a crowd of people that are more capable of quote unquote masking when those higher support needs individuals also need low demand living. Fundamentally, all of this stuff goes back to a eugenics pipeline of believing that you can disassociate yourself from higher support needs autistic folks, or I can mask better, I can fit in better, my struggles are different. No, they're not. You're always going to be closer to the highest support needs autistic person than you are going to be to a neurotypical or an allistic individual. I gleefully hurt members of my own community in the process of me trying to participate in self-expression and explain my identity and my worldview. I am somebody that tries very hard to live an anti-racist life as best as a white person can. Being an adult is learning and understanding You are not immune to propaganda.
You can read as many books as you want, be as knowledgeable as you want, have friends as part of these communities, try to touch base,
and still be naive enough or self-absorbed enough to not recognize when people are catering to your weaknesses to try to drag you down with them. I had to look super critically at the way that I was living my life and identifying with certain terms that contributed to me feeding into complacency and deciding that I could not change something fundamental about myself. I am not a psychologist. I am somebody with critical thinking skills, but I can now say with certainty that I don't have pathological demand avoidance. Do I have transition issues as someone with both ADHD and autism? Absolutely, babe. Absolutely. Am I able to use accommodations to work around some of my own symptoms and to create the things that I want to create successfully? Yes. This is not an innate mode of being. It is a result of me being profoundly traumatized and not listened to when I said, I don't want to do X or I want to do Y. And now, like a year and a half after all of this bullshit went down, I literally own my own gaming company. And I made a game that is over 100 pages long that not only is fun, but fully fleshes out the point that I'm trying to communicate. You are not immune to belief. You are not immune to faith in a topic with no evidence, and you are not immune to propaganda. And I really need white folks, especially, that find more kinship with queerness or the disability community or anything like that, to reflect on how little awareness they have about race dynamics and other elements of white supremacy that intersect with these identities. Because it does not matter how woke you are, it doesn't matter how gay you are, and it doesn't matter how disabled you are, that doesn't prevent you from falling into pipelines. I urge people to stay vigilant and stay cautious. And the reason that I say that is not to put fear in people's hearts, it's to remind people to think critically. If there's one thing that I want you to take from all of this, learn from my mistakes, look into things, research things, especially that are under the guise of science. If they don't have quality sources, don't believe them. But most importantly, as literally hundreds of millions of Black people have already said, being anti-racist is a lifelong journey that requires constant activity, maintenance, and care. And if you do not do that maintenance and care, you will hurt others with your ignorance.